Now to the latest information about the deadly night in Thayer when a Department of Children and Family Services caseworker was stabbed to death.
That's right. Deidre Silas died in January of 2022. Prosecutors say Silas was at the home responding to reports of children in danger when Benjamin Reed stabbed her. Today, Reed faced a judge for his bench trial. He's charged with first-degree murder, aggravated battery, and aggravated unlawful restraint.
News Channel 20's Carolina Hassett was in the courtroom today. She joins us live in Springfield with the latest. Carolina.
Don, Stacy, 7 people testified today, including Reed's father-in-law, who lived with him at the time and said he was a completely different person when he got angry. Now, Robert Moore lived with Reed inside the home where Silas was killed. Moore said Reed had anger issues and that he damaged the home when he got angry. This included him taking a sledgehammer to the dining room wall, as well as creating a hole in the floor. Reed's mother also said he can be scary.
What was he like when he wasn't on his medicine?
Scary.
Scary in what way?
Just the way he's got a body language to him when he gets upset about things.
So now you
But
said
he never scared me on his mind.
Now, Reed's mother, Jennifer, testified that Reed has had mental issues from a young age, and as he got older, he wanted to stop taking his medicine. Now, Jennifer also told the court Reed admitted to her that he killed Silas. At the courthouse, I'm Carolina Hassett. Back to you.
Thanks, Carolina. The court adjourned for today, but we'll be back at 9 a.m. tomorrow.
All right, new developments now. Day 2 in the bench trial for the man accused of murdering a Department of Children and Family Services caseworker in Sangamon County. Ben Reed is charged with murder in the death of Deidre Silas. Silas was killed in January 2022 inside a home in Thayer while checking on the welfare of children. Reed is charged with first-degree murder, aggravated battery, and aggravated unlawful restraint. And News Channel 20's Carolina Hassett was in the courtroom again today where she learned more details about that topic. Carolina.
That's right, Don. Benjamin Reed's sister-in-law and his ex-wife testified today. They were both in the house the day Silas was killed. Now, authorities say there were 12 people living in the 2-bedroom home at the time of the murder and that the home was filled with trash and clutter. Amanda Eberwein, Reed's ex-wife, says Silas asked to see their children, and that's when she says Reed snapped.
They were trying to pull him off, and I realized I couldn't, and I walked out.
where did you go?
Back to the dining room area with my kids.
Do you recall him saying anything to Ariel during that time?
I do.
I'm sorry.
I do.
Okay. What do you recall?
He said you could be next.
Now, Eberwein told the court she was aware of Reed's homicidal thoughts because he has threatened her before. Now, the state has rested its case. Now, tomorrow, it's the defense's turn to lay out its case. In studio, I'm Carolina Hassett. Back to you.
Thanks, Carolina. The trial will resume tomorrow morning.
Well, we have continued to cover Deidre Silas's death as part of our Project Illinois series. Silas was a child protective specialist for DCFS. There were outcries for change following her death and the death of Pamela Knight, who was also killed while on the job as a DCFS worker. Some of those changes were lawmakers pushing to protect DCFS workers. One bill allows those workers to carry pepper spray while out in the field. It was signed into law and put into effect in May of 2022.
Some state lawmakers feel more protection is needed for caseworkers. House Minority Leader Tony McCombie has been pushing for legislation that would make harming a caseworker a Class 2 felony. So far, the bill has not made it out of the state Senate.
Now to an update. The state rests its case against the man accused of stabbing a caseworker to death. Benjamin Reed's charged with killing Deidre Silas in January of 2022 inside a home in Thayer. News Channel 20's Carolina Hassett was in the courtroom today and joins us with more details on the tragic day in Reed's own words.
The state's attorney played Benjamin Reed's first interview after his arrest. The interview happened just hours after Deidre Silas was stabbed to death. In the video, Reed admits to Sangamon County deputies he did not want Silas taking his kids and says he, quote, blacked out and snapped. Officials say Reed was diagnosed with schizophrenia and has a history of suicide attempts. Reed also told deputies he hadn't taken his medication in over 2 years.
I don't like DCFS. They took my brother's kids, they took my sister's kids, they took my brother-in-law's kids.
So you grab the knife and go in there and find her?
Take my kids. No. Think about it. Said, trying to take my kids? You're gonna die. I don't know.
Okay.
Now, tomorrow we will hear more from the defense. Now, his lawyers expected to argue there's not sufficient evidence with the lack of fingerprint detection on the weapons used during the attack. In studio, I'm Carolina Hassett. Back to you.
Thanks for that update, Carolina. The trial will resume tomorrow at 9 a.m. We are continuing our coverage of the trial of the Sangamon County man accused of killing a DCFS caseworker.
Benjamin Reed is charged with murdering Deidre Silas. Deidre was killed in January of 2022. It happened during a welfare check on children at a home in Thayer. Reed was arrested in Decatur when he showed up at a hospital for his injuries. Now, he is charged with first-degree murder, aggravated battery, and unlawful use of a weapon. Today is the third day of his trial. He's charged again with killing Deidre Silas, a DCFS caseworker.
Silas was stabbed to death, as we mentioned, in January of 2022 inside a home in Thayer.
News Channel 20's Carolina Hassett is working for you from the courtroom to break down what we have learned about Reed's medical history.
Just himself as a, quote, ticking time bomb leading up to Silas's death. Now, today the court heard from the doctor who performed Reed's psychiatric evaluation and watched one of Reed's interviews. During that interview, Reed discloses he suffered physical and mental trauma from his father and said he hears voices in his head telling him to hurt people. One of the many disorders the doctor diagnosed him with was dissociative disorder, a trance-like state that humans use to block out trauma. Reed insisted that he is not the one who performed the crime, but the voices in his head. Dr. Terry Killian said Reed is deemed sane and said that the host is usually responsible for the crimes that are committed. Now, during the interview, Reed insists that he blacked out and does not remember what happened, despite admitting it to police and his mother. At the courthouse, I'm Carolina Hassett. Back to you.
Thank you, Carolina. We'll bring you more updates from today's trial later on News Channel 20 at 6.
Well, this case has led many state lawmakers to believe that DCFS workers need more protection on the job. A law was put into effect in 2022 that allows DCFS workers to carry pepper spray on the job. However, many feel that is not enough. Illinois House Minority Leader Tony McComey has been pushing for a bill that would make harming a caseworker with DCFS or the Department of Aging into a Class 2 felony.
It was, we believe, just an error when we start playing with bills, and somehow back in the day, those two were missed.
The bill would put caseworkers in the same category as police, firefighters, teachers, and first responders.
Today is day 3 for the trial of Benjamin Reed. Now, the man is charged with killing Deidre Silas, a DCFS caseworker. Silas stabbed to death back in January of 2022 inside a home in Thayer. News Channel 20's Carolina Hassett is working for you from the courtroom to break down what we have learned about Reed's own medical history.
That's right. Reed described himself as a, quote, ticking time bomb leading up to Silas's death. Now, today, the court heard from the doctor who performed Reed's psychiatric evaluation and watched one of Reed's interviews. During this interview, Reed discloses he suffered physical and mental trauma from his father and says he hears voices in his head telling him to hurt people. One of the many disorders the doctor diagnosed him with was dissociative disorder, a trance-like state that humans use to block out trauma. Reed insisted that he is not the one who performed the crime, but the voices in his head.
Whatever took over and actually did the crime is still a part of you. And that part of you will know that that's wrong. It's not as though this is some foreign entity that takes over your life.
Now, for this reason, Dr. Terry Killian said Reed is deemed sane and that the host is usually responsible for the crimes that are committed. Now, during the interview, Reed insists that he blacked out and does not remember what happened, despite admitting it to police and his mother. At the courthouse, I'm Carolina Hassett. Back to you.
Thanks, Carolina. The trial resumes tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Now, this case has led many state lawmakers to call for DCFS workers to have more protection on the job. A 2022 law allows DCFS workers to carry pepper spray on the job. However, many feel that's not enough. Some lawmakers are pushing for a bill that would make harming a caseworker with DCFS or the Department of Aging into a Class 2 felony. The bill was previously stalled in the state Senate.
A follow-up now. Today it was day 3 for the trial of Benjamin Reed, the man accused of killing Deidre Silas, a DCFS caseworker. Silas was stabbed to death in January of 2022 inside a home in Thayer. Today the court heard from the doctor who performed Reed's psychiatric evaluation and watched one of Reed's interviews. Reed described himself as a, quote, ticking time bomb leading up to the death of Deidre Silas. All right, one of the many disorders the doctor diagnosed him with was dissociative disorder. It's a trance-like state that humans use to block out trauma. During the interview shown, Reed discloses he suffered physical and mental trauma from his father and said he hears voices in his head telling him to hurt people. Reed insisted he is not the one who performed the crime, but the voices in his head.
Whoever took over and actually did the crime is still a part of you. And that part of you will know that that's wrong. It's not as though this is some foreign entity that takes over your body.
For this reason, Dr. Terry Killian said Reed is deemed sane and said that the host usually is responsible for the crimes that are committed. The trial resumes tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Inside the State House, the death of Deidre Silas has led many lawmakers to believe there should be more protection for DCFS workers. One lawmaker has put forward a bill that would increase the class of a felony for a person would be charged with should they harm a DCFS staff member. Under the proposed law, harming a DCFS worker would become a Class 2 felony unless permanent disability or great bodily harm was caused. Then it would increase to a Class 1 felony.
Basically, all this bill would do is put an aggravated battery in line. So it just bumps it up from a Class 3 to a Class 2.
A law already on the books is one that allows for DCFS workers to carry pepper spray. That law was signed in 2022.
Breaking news, a man on trial for killing a caseworker is found guilty.
A judge found Benjamin Reed guilty of all 3 charges, including murder. Deidre Silas was stabbed to death in January of 2022. She was a caseworker with the Department of Children and Family Services and was at Reed's house to check on the welfare of the children living there.
News Channel 20's Carolina Hassett was in the courtroom to hear the closing arguments and the verdict. Carolina?
That's right. After 4 days of testimony, the judge ultimately declared Benjamin Reed guilty for murder, but mentally ill. Now, Reed was found guilty on all charges, which includes first-degree murder, aggravated battery, and aggravated unlawful restraint. During the trial, the state argued Reed was a liar and was using his symptoms to get away with his behavior, while the defense argued he was mentally ill. But the judge said 2 things can be true at once.
Can he manipulate? Yes. Is he a manipulator? Absolutely. You bet. Did he try and do it here to gain a sanity edge? Absolutely. He sure did. Can he be a liar and a malingerer and still have documented and established mental illness? Absolutely.
Now, the judge continued to say that 5 qualified experts testified, saying they each diagnosed him with some kind of mental health disorder in his lifetime, and that while the mental illness impaired his judgment during the crime, he was still aware that what he was doing was wrong. Now, the judge added that in his 27 years of practice here in Sangamon County, it was one of the most heinous crimes that he's ever seen. At the courthouse, I'm Carolina Hassett. Back to you.
Thanks, Carolina. Reed's sentencing will be in November. Tune in tonight at 6, where we will have the defense attorney's reaction from today's verdict.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. A man accused of killing a DCFS worker is found guilty After a 4-day trial, Benjamin Reed was found guilty on all charges, including the murder of Deidre Silas. Silas was a DCFS child protective specialist who was stabbed to death in January of 2022 inside a home in Thayer. She was called to the home to check on the welfare of the children living there. Now, News Channel 20's Carolina Hassett was in the courtroom for the entire trial and brings us what the defense team had to say following that verdict. Carolina?
That's right. After days of testimony, the judge ultimately declared Benjamin Reed guilty for murder, but mentally ill. Now, Reed was found guilty for first-degree murder, aggravated battery, and aggravated unlawful restraint. The judge ruling that while Reed may have been manipulative, there is no doubt that he is mentally ill. Reed's attorney, Mark Wyckoff, describing this verdict as a hollow victory, saying that while it is the verdict they wanted, he feels for the Silas's family.
There is elation in the victory, not today. Terrible loss for her family, but at the same time, terrible for Benjamin Reed and his lifelong history of mental illness.
Now, Wyckoff went on to say that he is pleased that Reed will get the mental health treatment he needs, as, quote, a human being deserves to receive. Now, Wyckoff said in the meantime, Reed will remain in the Sangamon County Jail until his sentencing. At the courthouse, I'm Carolina Hassett. Back to you.
Thanks, Carolina. Now, the state's attorney declined our request for an interview. Reed's sentencing hearing will be on November 15th. Continuing coverage now. Today marked the 4th and final day of the Benjamin Reed trial.
As News Channel 20 Spencer Davis reports, a judge found him guilty of stabbing and killing a DCFS caseworker. Spencer.
After 4 days of testimony and arguments, the bench trial of Benjamin Reed finally reached a verdict. Guilty on all counts.
In January 2022, Reed was arrested at a Decatur hospital for the killing of Deidre Silas. The Department of Children and Family Services caseworker responded to reports of children in danger at a home in Thayer. The trial began on Monday with the prosecution calling 7 witnesses to the stand, including Reed's mother, who originally reported her son to the police.
I called the police, which kills me as his mother, but as a human being, I did what I had to do.
Did you know where they were going to be going next?
Yes, sir.
Did you provide that information to the
Yes, sir.
The defense's main argument for Reed's innocence was his mental health. Diagnosed with many mental illnesses, dissociative disorder was the one the defense pushed the most. However, an interview with Reed's doctor pushed against that argument.
Whatever took over and actually did the crime is still a part of you. And that part of you will know that that's wrong. It's not as though this is some foreign entity that takes over your life.
In the end, the judge ruled Reed guilty of the 3 charges levied against him, saying that Reed's mental illness could exist, but doesn't excuse him of his actions.
Did he manipulate? Yes. Is he a manipulator? Absolutely. You bet. Did he try and do it here to gain a sanity edge? Absolutely. He sure did. Can he be a liar and a malingerer and still have documented and established mental illness? Absolutely.
Now found guilty, Reed faces life without parole for first-degree murder, aggravated battery, and aggravated unlawful restraint. From the studio, I'm Spencer Davis.
Thanks, Spencer. Reed's sentencing hearing will take place in early November.
Thanks for watching. Stick around by subscribing today and don't miss a single video.